John chapter 1, starting at the first verse. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light, he came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not recognize him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, "This is the one I spoke about when I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me, because he was before me.' Out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in the closest relationship with the Father, has made him known." So we've been looking at historical figures in church history. And over the sort of several times that we've come back and had a little mini-series of this, we've looked at people born in the 1900s, the 1800s, the 1700s, the 1500s, 1400s, 1300s, and even one born in the year 354, my favourite, Augustine of Hippo. And not just because I like his name, one of my favourites for many other reasons as well. And check them out on our YouTube channel if you can get access to that, and look up some of those amazing characters. But today we're going to think about somebody who's not really a historical figure, somebody contemporary, somebody so young, he was born this century. Can you believe there's people born this century who are now making it? Wow, what this millennium is racing through, isn't it? He was born after we all got excited about the millennium bug and thought that planes were going to fall out of the sky when we changed to the year 2000. He was born in 2001, and he's been on television a lot recently. And as I wrote this on Tuesday I started preparing this, I was hoping that he was going to be on television a lot tonight as well. And it turns out that he is, because England won their semi-final on Wednesday. And he will be. Yes, last Saturday, England men's football team secured something quite unusual. They secured a penalty shootout win. Who'd have imagined England would have ever won in a penalty shootout? And I want you to look at this picture of the England team immediately after the final penalty went in. Trent Alexander-Arnold scored the winning penalty, and the rest of the players are rushing off to go and congratulate him. One is very kindly turning to the Swiss to sort of offer them commiserations. I think that's Luke Shaw. But one is on his knees giving thanks to God. Anybody know who that is? We've got a few. Yes, you know who that is. Bukayo Saka. Do you know what his name means? Well, I thought you might, because his parents came to England from Nigeria, and they settled in London. He was born in 2001, which I said makes him young enough to be grandchildren to most of us here, maybe young enough to be great-grandchild to some of us who are here this morning. And his parents spoke the Yoruba language. Do you know the Yoruba language in Nigeria? Apparently it's more southern Nigeria where that's spoken. And his name comes from that language, and it means adds to happiness. What a great name. And there's a lot of English people hoping he's going to add to their happiness tonight. But from an early age, his parents took him to a Pentecostal church in London, and he's never lost that faith. And he's in what must be a very, very difficult world, I think. He's suddenly very famous. He's suddenly got massive amounts of money, the kind of money that you or I will never earn in a lifetime, very young. The temptations all around him are huge, but he stands out from most of the other professional footballers as somebody who doesn't drink, who leads what by their standard, a very, very sort of clean lifestyle. And he continued to go to that Pentecostal church in London. And that adds to happiness. And if you check out his social media, like all famous young people, he is all over social media. But the sort of hashtag that he gives himself, God's child, that is how he refers to himself on social media. And it made me kind of think about what it means to be a child of God, and that immediately made me think of John chapter 1. If you look at verses 12 and 13, there's that amazing promise. For those who did receive him, who received Jesus Christ, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, nor a husband's will, but born of God. So what does it mean to be a child of God? And as we look at those couple of verses, one of the things we realise that this is not something that applies to everybody. This is a gift of God. It is something that he gives to certain people, gives them that right to be called children of God. It's not something that he gives to every human being all around the world. We often speak about all of humanity as being children of God, especially children. Whenever we look at children, we think about children, we tend to use that expression and say, well, they're all children of God. And it's nice and it's cozy and it gives us a warm feeling to think about people like that and think of children like that. But actually this tends to suggest that no, this is something special. This is a special gift that God gives to certain people. Being a child of God is not universal. It is something that defines us and makes us different. It is something that defines Bukayo Saka and sets him out as being different and separate from the rest of that England team that will be playing tonight. Which raises the question, how do we become a child of God? And if we refer to verse 12 again, it says that it is to those who received him, to those who believe in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Being a child of God is about true faith in Jesus Christ. Faith in the person Jesus and in the work of Jesus for us. Faith that Jesus really is everything that he claims to be, God in human form. Faith that he really did do what he claims to do. That he died on a cross to pay for our personal individual sins. To those who receive him, to those who recognize who he truly is, to those who recognize and believe in what he taught us and what he did, we become children of God, it says. And this really builds a lot on what we've been saying in the last few weeks. Remember George Whitfield, his great thing was, you must be born again. It's what he preached, and it's what Jesus said in John chapter 3 verse 3. Unless you're born again, you cannot even see the children of God. You can't even see the kingdom of heaven, let alone become children of God. go. So verse 12 lets us know. She really come on her own? I'm quite concerned now. Anyway. So those who believe that message of verse 12. But I'm just thinking, this might be worth you just letting, if you've got the rest are coming. Okay, let's go. There we go. It's great that they just come in so quietly without causing any disruption. Verse 12 reminds us, it is those who receive that message, those who are born again, as George Whitefield told us we need to be, who have that right to become children of God. And last week we looked at the Anabaptists, Menno Simons, and the whole Anabaptist movement, and the Mennonites, and their complaint against the established churches was that the established churches seemed to suggest that people could be saved just by attending the services, by sort of generally accepting roughly what the church doctrines were and the practices of the church. And the Anabaptists said, no, you need to have a genuine, personal, individual faith in Jesus Christ. You need to die to your old self and be born again to a new life, in which Jesus is not just your Saviour, but He's your God and the Lord of your new life. They said you've got to be born again in that way, and that baptism represents that. Represents that rebirth as a child of God. They said just as we go down into the water, so we accept that our old self has died. As we come up out of the water in baptism, it represents that new life, being born again as a child of God. Bukayo Saka, he knows he's a child of God. He knows he's somebody who's been given new birth into God's kingdom through his faith in Jesus Christ. He lives with Jesus as his Lord. Some of you, I think, will know a little bit about Bukayo's history playing for England. Having showed excellent form for Arsenal and in the England under-21s, Gareth Southgate called him up into the full England side when he was just 19. His very exciting and attacking style of play brought something that had perhaps been missing from the England side, and he became a firm favourite with the supporters. The European Championships that were due to be held in 2020. Maya, can you go back to your mum? Back to mum. You might remember 2020 was a year that almost kind of didn't happen. Everything got put off and postponed because of COVID. The Euros were postponed to the following year, and at the age of 19 he was brought in, and he was part of the squad that got through to the final. And in that final, it went all the way to penalties. And England, in their more traditional form, lost the penalty shootout. 3 England players missed their penalties. Bukayo himself, Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho. Interestingly, all 3 who missed their penalties that night have all expressed a personal faith in Jesus Christ. But it wasn't for their faith that they were attacked over the following days. It was for their colour. People took to social media and gave these 3 men horrible racial abuse. Remember, Bukayo was just 19 years old when he was receiving this nasty abuse online. I remember thinking afterwards, if I was one of them, I would be tempted to say, well, stuff the lot of you. I am not going to go out and represent this country again. Why should I bother and put myself through that? Bukayo didn't, And last Saturday, 3 years later, still only aged 22, he stood up and took one of those penalties. And he scored. And he gave thanks to God afterwards. In his post-match interviews, the first thing that he wanted to say to the interviewers was to express his faith and to thank God for taking him to where he was. As all parents know, sometimes you have to let your children go through tough experiences. You can't always take them out of those things. You're there, you're ready to catch them when they fall. You try to help them through, and you try to help them to go on and to learn from and to be built up by those experiences. And God, as our Father, as our Abba, as our Dad, sometimes lets us go through painful experiences to prepare us for things that are to come. Verse 14 refers to Jesus as the one and only Son. Different versions translate it slightly differently. The complex Greek that's included there points towards Jesus being one of a kind, something very special, so a unique kind of Son of God, who was so completely united to God that the two are inextricable. They're part of one being. Verse 18 expresses that they're in their closest relationship. They're united. And yet when Jesus went into the wilderness and was tempted by Satan, the Bible tells us that God's Spirit led Jesus into the desert to be tempted. The passage that we read from Isaiah says it was the Lord's will to crush him. Why would he do that? Why would God choose to put the one who's in the closest relationship with him through that? He did it because it was the only way that our sin could be paid for and that we could become children of God. And if God is prepared to let part of his own being, a unique Son of a different kind, prepared to let his Son go through all that, then it should tell us two things. First of all, it tells us just how much God wants us to be his children. He was prepared to pay that enormously high price in order to have us as his children. How much must God love you that he allowed Jesus to go through that experience so that you could be a child of God? But secondly, it also tells us that if God would let Jesus go through that for a higher cause, then sometimes he will allow us to go through painful experiences for a greater cause. Sometimes things will happen to us, things that we will go through, which we don't understand and we can't explain. And even looking back, we think, why would God let me go through that? There may be times where we just don't see it. But maybe it's for something better, something greater, something to prepare us for something that's to come, something so that we can speak to other people in a way that we don't even realise we're doing because we've been through those experiences. Those three men who profess a faith in Jesus Christ were subject to that horrible abuse simply for missing a penalty in a game. Why would God allow that? Why would he allow three people who professed a faith in Jesus to go through that? We may never know why. But it certainly paved the way for Bukayo, who is known on social media as a child of God, to stand before a nation 3 years later and say, God helped me through those experiences. I've come back stronger because of what God made me in those days. And he was able to say that to 18 million people watching him on television at the time. Wow, what an experience for him. Who knows what God can do through our painful experiences that he allows us to go through as a loving parent. Now, there are many things that make Bukayo Saka very different from the other characters that we've looked at in this series of well-known Christian people from history. And here's another one that makes him very, very different from Augustine of Hippo or any of the others. None of those other people, none of the Wesleys, had their own peri-peri sauce named after them. How about that? Peri-peri Saka. You can get it from Nando's if you're so inclined. And I found this photo about him and his sauce. But look at what it says. Nigeria's Bukayo Saka. Hang on a minute. While he's scoring goals, he's definitely English. If he starts missing, we'll call him Nigerian again. That's fine. But while he's scoring, he's ours. We'll have him. But there's a couple of important points there. Firstly, the way that we might think about race. Because if we accept the biblical explanation of creation and of human origins, then we realise that actually there is only one race of humanity. We are all children of Adam and Eve. This is the great thing about really truly accepting the biblical account of origins of humanity. There is only one race. A single race of people right across the globe. And we can actually go even later than Adam and Eve, can't we? And say we're all descendants of Noah and his wife. Because everybody else in humanity was wiped out. Genetically, we're all one. The biblical view of origins leaves zero room for racism. But from within the one single genetic race of people that God has created, God has called some to be his family. God has called some to be his children through their faith in Jesus Christ. And he's called us from all nations, from all backgrounds, of all skin colours, to make us a single family of his children. And that is our identity. Our identity is as children of God. That is what makes us who we are. That is what matters. That is what should shape everything about who we are. People today are placing huge emphasis on identity and on who I am and what makes me who I am. What race am I? What gender am I? What personality group do I belong to? What political affiliations do I have? Am I remain or believe? You see, people are still identifying by that all these years after the vote on that. What social media group defines me? The Bible says all of that is nothing. None of that matters one bit. What matters is, do you belong to Jesus Christ or not? If your faith is in Jesus Christ, you are a child of God, and that trumps everything else about our identity. Bukayo could have chosen to play internationally for England, where he was born, or for Nigeria, where his parents were from. And ultimately, it would not have mattered one bit to his true identity. He would have always been a child of God, and that matters far, far more than what football team you play for. And I mentioned earlier his Yoruba name means adds to happiness. And I'm sure that his parents were thinking about their own happiness and their own joy. He was born shortly after they'd emigrated and come to this country. And the birth of their baby when they arrived in this country just added to their joy as they settled here. But as a child of God, he adds to the happiness of God too. Romans chapter 12 says, therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Jesus went to the cross for the joy that was set before him. And if you are a child of God, that joy is you. Why did he go through the agony of the cross? For you. So that you could be forgiven. So that you could be a child of God. Saving you, bringing you into God's kingdom, was what drove Jesus and what gives him happiness. Bukayo means adds to happiness. If you're a child of God, you are a Bukayo. You add to the happiness of God. What a great blessing and a great joy that is to know.